Welcome to Like a Bomb, a podcast about powerful women from the past and present. Not fragile like a flower.
Fragile like a bomb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 11 of Like a Bomb. I'm Bailey.
I'm Jiller, Mom.
Yeah, and words are hard.
Words are definitely hard. Speaking is hard at this point. I am waiting for my co-teacher tomorrow to be underneath the desk in the fetal position crying because my voice dies. He
That
says
doesn't sound like fun.
he just wants me to have it through tomorrow. He doesn't care if I can speak on Friday. But they're taking a test, so it's a day where I don't need to talk as much.
Important.
Yes. But you should see his face when my voice cracks. It's hilarious.
Well, at posting, this will be the Monday before Thanksgiving for all of our American listeners, which is most everyone.
Yeah.
So all the cheesy what are you thankful for? There's a lot of things this year and a lot of not things.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag this year. And when this comes out, you'll be here.
Yeah, I'll be there in
Yeah.
person with you making TikTok videos.
Well, when it comes out, I won't actually be here. You'll be here, but I'll be somewhere else.
You'll be at work.
Yeah.
I'll be at the house. Or maybe somewhere else.
Depending on what we figure out about cars.
Yes.
I feel like we have so many cars, but not enough cars. Why is that always a thing in this household? So many.
I don't know. Murphy.
Yeah.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, definitely Murphy's Law. Jeez.
That's why my car was named Murphy.
Yep, it's the only
Because
reason.
the other cars were pulling out the law, proving it.
Yep, yep. And I named my new one Lorelei, didn't I?
I think so. My new one's Ravioli because it's a RAV4.
Yeah, I think mine's Lorelei. I didn't never ask Piper. I don't remember if she named the new one that was totaled.
I think she did, but I don't remember it.
She's on her fourth car.
I know.
Parents
And
out
it's
there.
not her fault.
I know, parents out there. How many cars have you bought for your kids that just don't last?
Okay, the stupid thing is that EcoSport, Ford just sucks, and they've literally already retired that model that didn't even make it 4 years.
Yeah, that lasted 60,000 miles. The Elantra lasted a year until it was totaled. Stupid airbags. Somebody
Just
explain the
stupid
science
everything.
behind that. I mean, I get the science. It's not safe because the airbag's deployed, but if the only damage is the airbags, there's got to be a better way than just totaling out cars.
There has to be.
I
That
don't
is really
understand.
stupid. That's just
Yeah.
something that you should be able to replace.
You can, but apparently it's more expensive to replace it than actually to buy another car, from
I feel
what
like
I
it should be
understand.
something easily replaceable, like an air filter. You just
Yeah,
plug it in,
I guess
and it goes poof.
the pulleys and the magic behind it just stop working. I
It's
don't
literally
know.
just sensors.
Maybe I don't know. I just know that it's totaled.
It has to be a lot of sensors that are in the airbags themselves that
Yeah, there's got
are
to
too
be.
pricey.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot. I mean, yeah.
Some of my coworkers, if they're still listening this far, do know cars very well, so please explain to me later at work.
Well, I need to know cars because I need to figure out what's the best solution because we have to plan for if Murphy dies. So if anybody has any dealers in the area of you don't know where I live, that's not going to help me.
But the personal people in real life that know you,
Piper's car was totaled. She is driving Bailey's old car that may not last.
that was
We
your
are
old
getting
car.
yes.
That currently has 149,000 miles.
Well, I think the one she said, according to Piper, the car that just got totaled had 150 some thousand miles on it. I don't know if I bought it with that much.
I have
know.
no clue. All I
Yeah.
know is Murphy is going to be driven 150,000 miles. Piper's going to go through that big mark with it. And I drove through the big mark of the 100,000 shortly after I got it.
Yeah, well, if anybody knows a reliable, safe car for a reasonable price, I may be in the market sooner rather than later. If not, I might save all my pennies from the 10,000 jobs I have, which I don't have pennies because the house is expensive. And give Piper my car because I know it's reliable-ish.
I mean, it's an escape.
I know.
She just is now currently got another escape.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to say that I'm loving hearing from the people that I know in my real life, what they think of what we're saying and doing and our podcast, because that makes us feel really great. Like this, we're getting a message out, which is the whole point. We want to get
Yeah,
messages out. I was talking to a coworker today and said like she hasn't gotten to our last episode yet. And I was like, yeah, it was our most political, which we try not to be political. And right as I said that, she's about to say, and I said, I know, because it's a podcast about women, we're political. Um,
exactly.
so it's just, we are also trying to be diplomatic for our lives. But um, she gave me two requests, and one of them you just did last week. So,
Yep, you sent me that screenshot.
yep. So you will know, maybe, I guess I'm going to take on the other one.
So I guess,
Unless
hi
you,
Jenny.
oh yeah. Hi, Jenny. Unless you want to do the other one that was listed, because you may know more than I do.
Ah,
I
I know
mean,
a professor who was obsessed with this other person, which, by the way, is Billie Eilish. There's no point hiding what the person is.
well,
But yeah,
I was like, we could just call Molly, because wasn't she like obsessed at one point?
Molly was obsessed with Billie Eilish, but not anywhere near the level of one of my professors in college. He was very much obsessed. We would go into class and he'd be playing, and this is with auditorium, one of the big classrooms that could fit like 300 people, and he was playing Billie Eilish, and we're all like, why? He also made a Buffy reference in one of the
Oh,
clicker questions during class one day, and I was the only person out of 200, 300 people that knew who that it was referencing Buffy, which is kind of sad knowing my
wow.
age that I was the only one who knew that it was Buffy.
Wow.
Hi, Finn.
I'm sorry if my voice may die. My cat is apparently needy right now. Um,
They need their mommy. They need squishes.
yeah, I'm sorry. Buddy, mommy needs you not.
Well, I'll get to
Uh,
squish Finn and Brody soon enough, or technically at this time. It's a couple days before Thanksgiving, essentially, to everyone
yeah.
else, or past it. Who knows?
Ooh, hey, it won't be, wait. If you're listening on the day it comes out, Thanksgiving has not happened. We need a good baked macaroni and cheese recipe that's not $1,000, because the last one we did, it had really fancy cheeses. It was super expensive. It was really, really good. But it was a lot of money. So if you have a awesome baked mac and cheese recipe, we are really in need for Thanksgiving, because we
Yes, please,
actually are.
baked mac and cheese recipe.
Yes.
Comment it. We
I
have
mean,
comments.
yes, we do have a comment. He asked me today. He said, "Did you see my comment?" I said, "Yeah, my daughter sent it to me." He's like, "I will always be the first student who commented." And I was like,
He's just gonna
"Yes, you
comment first
will
on
be."
all of them now.
Yes, I was like, "Yes, you are." So, and then he asked me advice about a girl.
Oh. Well, we
Yeah, I
can't
get
tell more about this. Now he's gonna be extra embarrassed.
well, I've somehow become the therapist this year, and what broke.
Somehow, when have you not always been it?
I have, but this year they literally like call me that. But then
Oh.
today they decided I was like the cool uncle aunt, and I was like, okay, can I just be the aunt? And then so a student then called me aunt something. I don't know what. I guess my name. What it was. But so I am not just a therapist. Apparently, I am the cool aunt, and I'm like, okay, I don't know that. Okay,
Hmm.
I don't know if my nieces and nephews think I'm the cool aunt, but thanks, kids. I'll take it.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't hang out with them as
I
much.
know. I don't see
They're
them.
all a state away.
Well, I mean, two of them are grown, and
Yep.
I don't ever go up there. So, but hi guys, if you're listening,
I don't think they are.
I
Piper
don't either.
should let them pester them. But like, guys,
Yeah, I don't know if she's
it's
even.
okay. I
Yeah.
already pestered one friend that's in Washington to go watch because I saw the analytics and I went, you aren't watching. You should go watch. He went, I know.
All that data. Wow. Yeah.
Is it data or data? Comment below, because I
And
say data.
I say it depending on what the context is.
It's always data to me.
Well, it depends on what I'm saying. I can say it two different ways in one sentence.
Just like it could be a lightning bug or firefly.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of things. I did have, my dad says wrestling.
Yeah, just different backgrounds. Not
Yep.
everything is Latin or Greek or this or that in background.
Some of it is just you drop out letters because you want to, or you add letters. Seriously, my dad says wrestling. I said it like that for the longest time.
Dude, terrible.
Yeah, well, I have to think wrestling.
Yeah, the most southern thing, besides y'all
Mm,
and others
yeah,
other things.
yeah. Down yonder. Bless your heart.
Everyone
Probably
knows
the.
the bless your heart.
Yes, I hope they do. Oh, I don't know. Okay, are you ready?
Are
I know
you
such a.
ready? Your story's first.
I know. I'm as ready as I can be. Finn's falling asleep over there. I have no idea where Brody is.
I
I
don't know.
think
I
he
thought he
might
was
be up.
the black jacket or whatever on your bed.
No, it's my purse. Well, I got rid of the ladybug he was hunting, so I don't know what he's doing.
He's hunting
It,
another one, maybe.
I put it safely outside. Ladybug has lived.
Not drowning them like I did, where my freshman year partner was very upset that I would drown them because they got into my dorm.
Yeah, I don't know how that one got. It's like one ladybug, only
Oh no,
one.
I had a collection in the corner. Not as bad as my roommate Jill.
Uh, the. Do you remember the house in Gettysburg?
Yes, I remember the mountain house.
That had
I remember
apparently
it being
a.
infested with ladybugs.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, well, we're here for all things women, and when I was trying to come up with story for last episode, before the election, I was looking up like female rulers in history and things like that, and then the election happened, and I changed my mind. So
Extra depressy.
yes, but I like deep dove into like all of these rulers from ancient Mesopotamia, ancient, China, ancient, so many things.
Yeah.
So lots of, this was going to come in. I'm going to grab some ancient stuff here and there because, well, I think it's cool and history's fun.
Yes, and it's important to learn from our history and know it.
Yes. And I was, yes. So I'm going to dive right in. So it's kind of a history lesson. Um, a little bit. So
Yeah.
it's going to start with like women in ancient Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia. No, I said it earlier. Mesopotamia. No, my goodness.
Words are hard and now I can't even figure out how to say it.
Mesopotamia. I said it all day long, fine. Like, oh my goodness. Okay. First things first. Women were subordinates. Like they were secondary to men. They were first, like, second to their fathers, second to their husbands, and then second to their sons. So that was, beginning of time that we know. It's not recorded history necessarily, understanding that recorded history means that it is written down in some form. Not all history is recorded because it's just history that we're learning from like finding tombs and things like that and deciphering other objects. But there's a bunch of different classifications. I am not really going to go through that because it's, starts with nobility and upper class and ends with enslaved people. So I think we kind of know hierarchy no matter what society we've talked about throughout history. But I will say that single women are very much at the bottom. So yeah, that that really hasn't changed.
I wonder how much was learned through, I believe, cuneiform. Was there written in Mesopotamia?
Mm,
At least the
yes, it
civilization
was.
that
Yes,
was
it was.
there.
Yes, it was. Yes, yes. And if you, in case you don't know, this is the modern day is mainly Iraq, but includes parts of Iran, Kuwait, Syria, and you said it was
Turkey?
Turkey. Okay. So if you're trying to kind of figure out the location this is happening in the world. And if you ever took like sixth grade social studies, you talked about the Fertile Crescent and those kind of things. It's all in that same area. So that's the area that we're talking about. And that's considered like the first agricultural like societies, and hence the word fertile. So they had the greatest freedoms in the early stages of Mesopotamian social, and I said it right that time, social and cultural development. So like when they were first actually becoming a culture and a society is when women had the most freedoms. So and it's from the Uruk period of, wow, these are a really long time ago, 4010 BCE to 2009 BC through the early dynastic period, which is 2900 to 2334 BCE. So thousands upon thousands of years ago. They're writing, if they, some of this, there wasn't even written word. Like it was clay tablets and reeds, like papyrus, that was how they did things. I joke with my students, and when they, call me old, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get my reed and my tablet, and they have no idea what I'm talking about.
What, not just your oral history, just passing down ages and stories?
I mean, it was a lot oral, but some of it was written. So women could be landowners, business owners, administrators, bureaucrats. Which, were they running for office? I don't know how that worked. Doctors, scribes, clergy, artists, bakers, brewers, priestesses, and monarchs. So they were able to live on their own, initiate divorce, learn to read and write, and assert their autonomy. So learning to read and write is a right that they were able to do thousands upon thousands of years ago. But however, in some of these areas that we just said for modern day, women aren't able to do that and don't have that right, which is, it makes me sad and angry, knowing children from my occupation that have lived all over the world. It's just sad to see that, but that's why we do our best to fight for people's rights. Moving on. The expectations for women at this time were, of course, to marry, bear children, and run the household, raise the children, and occasionally work in the fields. Along with everyone else, because everybody prayed multiple times a day because they didn't want to make the gods angry and have them do a drought or, anything that could disrupt their everyday life and be prosperous and healthy and successful. They prayed many, many times a day to their gods. It didn't matter how busy they were. They had to stop and pray. So to lessen women's to-do list, basically, I mean, that's paraphrasing in my words, they put a statue of a praying woman in the temple, so women were able to pray less because there was a woman already praying for them. So they could have more time to prepare meals and do the sewing. I was like, okay, so men still had to pray more, just as much, because they didn't put a praying man in the temple. They did it for women so they could have more time to do their things, which, I mean, I think that was kind of neat. So, okay. So the first, not recorded, but first theorized ruler in history, her name is Queen Huabi of Ur. So this is, of course, ancient Mesopotamia. But because it's not recorded history, there is not necessarily a written document that says she was queen. But when they found her tomb, there was, and I'm going to go through all that, like evidence that she was a queen. And because of the dates she ruled, because she ruled in 2600-ish BCE. So nobody else has ruled anywhere in the world that they have any kind of record to say that. So impressive. Little is known about her life because, again, not recorded history. Based on her tomb and her remains, she was less than 5 feet tall, and she was about 40-ish when she died. Her remains are actually in the Natural History Museum in London, and it says they include her badly damaged skull. But when I looked, I didn't see a definite how she died. There was things about how some of her attendants and servants were killed in her tomb to, be to help her in the afterlife. But it doesn't say. But then if she's got a badly beaten skull, like, huh? Or did they just drop it? I mean,
Suspicious.
I feel like there needs to be more information. Did the architect, not architects,
Archaeologist?
there we go. Did they just drop it and say, "Oops, we found it like this"? Hopefully
Who
not.
knows?
I
Not
don't
us.
know. I don't know. Well, she served in the early dynastic period, and it was the high point of the Sumerian culture. So I don't know what everybody else thinks of when they hear Sumerian. Me personally, I go to Ghostbusters because they talk about the Sumerian gods and things and Ghostbusters. So she ruled the Sumerian city of Ur during the first dynasty of Ur. So there is questions about the regarding of her status as a real queen. She was not listed in the Sumerian king list. There is one woman that is listed, but she's listed as a king in there. However, she is a woman. But she's listed as having had ruled for 100 years, which is unrealistic. Also, if you go through the history, it does still say she's the reigning queen of first recorded ruler of women for a woman. However, if you go through and look at the information that's put out there, there's a lot of theories that she was just used, that name and a person they made up, just used because her story is that she was a barkeeper and somebody gave, it's a whole thing. Maybe she was just somebody to make people behave better in future times. So this is not, she's not listed in anywhere that she is actually a queen. There is nothing written for sure anywhere else. But however, she is identified on her cylinder seals. If you don't know what a cylinder seal is, because I had to Google it too, because they wrote in cuneiform, which is hieroglyphics. If you're not sure what that is, it's hieroglyphics. So it's pictures. Their words are pictures. So they had these cylindrical, like they rolled. They were kind of like stamps. So they had images on it about that person, and they rolled it to be a stamp when they did correspondence. And so she had 3 that were pinned to her. 2 of them didn't have any names and titles on them, and they depicted things that would be of her younger life. Another one actually did have her listed as a word that is a word that it's Nin or Irush, and it means either queen or priestess. So, being that the symbols have multiple meanings and multiple ways of pronouncing them, there is question of it, was she legit queen or was she just a priestess? However, I'm going to give you proof that explains why she was the queen. Um,
Oh,
yes.
fancy
Um,
foreshadowing.
yes. Um, and the seals didn't have a name or title. 2 of them didn't have a name or title. One of them did. But they also didn't mention a king or a husband or father. They didn't have like, she is queen because she's married to this person. She is queen because her father died. It doesn't have anything like that in there so that you can decipher that she was attached to any man, meaning that she ruled in her own right, which is impressive for anybody. I mean, just coming and being like, yep, I'm taking over.
Yeah, especially the past, 4,500 years after.
Yes. So, okay. One thing. So, okay, cuneiform, again, is just pictures, and they use certain images to denote certain things. Well, they use date clusters. So if a person was holding date clusters, they had to be a king or queen. It was never used for anything else. And on her seals, one of her seals has her, it's the older one that has her actual like signature and title, has her holding date clusters, which by all other things defined by Sumerian culture, that would mean that she is a queen. regardless of it saying a title that could be priestess or queen. Um, and being that that's how they wrote and that was their communication, we have to take that as some kind of important symbol if nobody else had that was not a king or queen. So her burial and her tomb as well also prove that she is royalty. She was in the Royal Cemetery for Kings, which was multiple tombs. And in those multiple tombs, so she was born in buried in Ur, which was, past existence, and it's in Near East modern Iraq now. So she was buried but surrounded by her possessions, which was the richest ever found in a Sumerian tomb. So queens and kings were very much decorated so that they were beyond a doubt stand out. Nobody else could be above them and shine above them. There's kings and queens in history where they like demanded that nobody else wore this color because they were to shine out. So if she has more professions, possessions than
Professions.
any other Sumerian tomb ever, that also denotes huge standing. She was in an elaborate headstress, and from her entire upper body, and you can look it up. It is crazy. Is like it's basically like a shirt done in just gemstones and beads. It's like goes down to her waist. So it's like her entire upper body is covered in that, which again, that is how queens dress. They were above everybody else, so they were more glamorous. And depending on which article I read, it said she had 26 or 52 attendants, male and females, that, of course, were buried with her to help her through the afterlife. She had a pair of oxen attached to a sledge. They had lions, a horse, a harp. Like, it's like a mansion and everything that I will never even be able to imagine.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how heavy her clothes, her garments of wealth were.
I know, like, wow. And maybe that's why she was so short. It just kept pushing her down and pushing her down and pushing her down.
I mean, historically, humans haven't had as much need. I mean, there's different places where we're shorter than average and taller than average on the human scale. But as Americans, we're taller than average than a lot of other countries.
I think the last time I checked, which has been a while, is the average man is 5'10" and the average woman is 5'5" in America.
Average man's a little bit shorter than 5'10", I think.
Yeah, I don't remember. I
I feel
feel
like
like
it's
that's
5'9".
I don't know, because I remember reading it, and one of the times I read it, it was when I was, I was at the time 5'5", not 5'5" anymore, apparently. Uh, but I was the average height of the average woman, and my dad is the average height of the average man because he's 5'10".
I'm the
Um,
average height of the average man.
which I wonder how tall Josh is.
I don't know. I don't know how tall either of your brothers are.
Jake's like 6'1", 6'2". He's tall.
Well, I haven't seen the other one in a long time.
Yeah, we saw him at his wedding, Piper and I.
Yeah, you did.
So, um, so the questions are basically what comes down to is how did she become queen? Like if she's a queen, which we see she has a date cluster that proves that she's a queen because it's only used for king and queen, not just royalty. Like can't be like a lord or a dame or whatever royal names are. I don't
There's not a
know.
whole, court like there
Well,
has been for the modern English in the
no, but
same
there
way.
was some upper class, upper class nobility that was not kings and queens. So they did have some of that, but it was only date clusters was only done. The it was the most impressive possessions in all Sumerian tombs. Like that says a lot. Her wardrobe alone said that she was standing out for a reason, but none of it is attached to a man. None of the information has her attached as a wife, as a daughter, or as a mom, because if her husband dies and she has a male heir, she would be ruling in his place until he was a certain age. There is nothing that indicates she had a child, nothing that indicates she had a husband, and nothing to indicate necessarily that she was taking over for her father, because she was the only. But either way, even if she was a widow that was now somehow in the place or the daughter of, there are protocols. There is a man who goes in place. So whether there is, not a son, There's got to be an uncle, not be an uncle or a cousin. They can't be any of that. There can't be, rival armies going, oh, he's dead. We can take over. So this woman had to make sure that she had all rival armies. And there was a lot of killing back then, guys. I mean, lots of killing. Like, she had to make sure that they were not going to take her from the throne. She had to make sure that there was not another male heir that was going to take it. That's a scary thing. Especially, like, yes, there is a society rules, you don't kill people. That's just kind of been a thing for beginning of time. But
Such as the eye for an eye.
yes, but there are times where bloodshed was a little more common and she took over the throne somehow. But because it's not recorded history, we don't have anything written that says this is what happened. They haven't found any evidence to show what's happened. And maybe somehow it would show up. But I feel like since they uncovered this tomb like 100 years ago, I would hope that they found everything, but then again, we don't know if we dropped her skull and said, oopsie, found it like this. So, but I think it's pretty cool that thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, a woman, not even a big woman, like a tiny little woman, she was like, yeah, I'm going to be the ruler and you're just going to deal with it. And she did. And that's what I got.
And she was clearly rather wealthy and successful enough.
Yeah. I don't know where to get a lion, much less lions. I mean, granted, it was a whole different, she probably had lions maybe in her backyard. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't
No.
remember the distribution of the lion's habitats. I literally saw a graph of that yesterday, what it used to be and what it is currently.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's like a huge lot of lions around this area. Maybe there were.
There used to be roughly around. There's some still in India, and there was a lot through
Yeah, I
most
know
of
there's,
the continent of Africa. So there's a decent
huh.
bit through more northern Africa and Southwest Asia and the Middle East.
I
It's
mean,
very likely.
she didn't just have one lion. It says lions.
Yeah, multiple.
Yeah, and a team of oxen pulling a sledge, which I'm assuming is sled, just with different letters.
Mm.
But I didn't Google it either because it's taken me a couple of days to get my notes because every time I sit down to do them, something else happens.
It's okay. I forgot at first. But I had already looked up my person yesterday.
Well, I would like to say her name again because I feel like we need to give her more acknowledgement. It was Queen Puambi, and she ruled thousands of years ago in her own right.
Woo, women rulers
It happens.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's still deep rooted sexism. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is why the election that
No,
does
but
exist still.
I mean, no, sexism. I mean, all isms exist.
Exactly, and that still is why some people didn't vote the way they did. Not like they would have probably voted any different. But anyways, based off where we're from, not even just the U.S., but with us in general, but this name of this person is a household name, and it's a Disney movie. It's Pocahontas.
Ah, that's what I was going to go with.
So Disney, well, very much had it whitewashed and glorified.
Yes.
And Pocahontas is much older in the movie than she actually was when she would have met John Smith. That's also assuming she actually did. So I have two articles up. One is from the National Park Service that kind of goes over her life and legend as the written history, as in the whitewashed history, and her story as told through the oral history of her people. Dr. Linwood Little Bear Costello and Angela L. Daniel Silverstar. And then my other article is from the Indigenous Foundation. It adds a little bit more history and nuances, but it doesn't go as much into the details of her life.
Well, I keep trying to think how you said Pocahontas because you loved that Disney movie when you were little.
Yes, it was definitely
And
one of my favorites.
but I cannot remember how you said it because it wasn't Pocahontas. You were a little tiny thing.
Yeah, I couldn't say Pocahontas when I was little.
It bugs me that I can't remember how you used to say it.
Well, maybe you'll remember it soon enough.
Hmm.
So, I will go over the whitewashed written history because that's what the National Parks Service document has first. Um, and then that's helpful for nuances that aren't explicitly listed in the oral history but are referenced to later on. And as a heads up, um, I'm very sorry. I will mispronounce many things. I have written down some how to properly pronounce, but it is not going to be the best. Hopefully, I will do good, but we'll see. And once I reach the oral history, as it's more written in how brutal the world can be, there will be a trigger warning of rape being involved. So you can listen until I go to the oral history and then just skip the rest if you are going to be bothered by that.
Or you're
So
one of my students. You're too young to not listen.
it just mentions it.
Okay.
It won't. It's not going to be detailed.
Okay.
Um, so the written history is that Pocahontas was born around 1596 and named Amun Amunat Amun Amonute, though she was also given more private name of Mutaka, Matoaka. She was called Pocahontas as a nickname, which meant playful one because of her frolicsome and curious nature. She was daughter of the chief Powhatan. I am not going to try to say his name. And he was the paramount chief of the Powhatan chiefdom. At its height, at its height, the chiefdom had a population of about 25,000 people and included more than 30 um, Algonquian speaking
Algonquin.
tribes.
Algonquin. Now I can't say it. Algonquin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Each with its own werewolves, its chief. And the Indians, as it's written in here, the natives called their homeland. I'm not even going to try. Senkomoko? Tsenacomoco. And as daughter of the paramount chief, Powhatan, custom dictated that Pocahontas would have accompanied her mother, who would have gone to live in another village after her birth. And they were still cared for. However, nothing is written by the English about Pocahontas' mother. Some historians have theorized that she died during childbirth, so it's possible that Pocahontas did not leave like most of her half siblings. Either way, Pocahontas would have eventually returned to live with her father and her half siblings once she was weaned. Her mother, if still living, would have been free to remarry. And some of this is actual historic things, such as one going into what she wore and looked like, most likely. When she was young, she would have worn little to no clothing and had her hair shaven except for a small section in the back that was grown out long and usually braided. The shaven parts were probably bristly most of the time, as Powhatan Indians used mussel shells for shavings. In winter, she could have worn a deerskin mantle, although not everyone could afford one. As she grew, she would have been taught women's work, even though the favorite daughter of the paramount chief Powhatan afforded her a more privileged lifestyle and more protection. But she still needed to know how to be an adult woman. You gotta live in society. You can't just mooch
Take,
off your
take,
dad.
take. Yeah.
Um, so women's work was separate from men's work, but both were equally taxing and equally important as both benefited all of Powhatan society. As Pocahontas would learn, besides bearing and rearing children, women were responsible for building the houses, which they may have owned. Women did all the farming, planting and harvesting, the cooking, preparing and serving, collecting water needed to cook and drink, gathered firewood for the fires, which women kept going all the time, made mats for the houses inside and out, made baskets, pots, cordage, wooden spoons, platters, and mortars. Women were also barbers for the men and would process any meat the men brought home, as well as tanning hides to make clothing. Another important thing Pocahontas had to learn to be an adult woman was how to collect edible plants. As a result, she would need to identify the various kinds of useful plants and the ability to recognize them in all seasons. And so these are all skills that she would have learned by age 13, which was the average age Powhatan women reach puberty, also known as maturity and like as an adult. Um, so when the English arrived and settled Jamestown in May 1607, Pocahontas was about 11 years old. Pocahontas and her father would not meet any Englishmen until the winter of 1607 when Captain John Smith was captured by Powhatan's brother. I'm not going to say his name, is going to be butchered, but the chief's brother captured John Smith. And once captured, Smith was displayed at several Powhatan Indian towns before being brought to the capital of the Powhatan chiefdom, which is Warrouuma. I had it. I did Google this one because it
Try
was brought up
again.
more often
Try again.
to the chief. And so what happens next is what kept Pocahontas and Captain Smith so linked throughout history. The famous rescue of John Smith by Pocahontas. As Smith tells it, he was brought in front of Chief Powhatan. Two large stones were placed on the ground. Smith's head was forced upon them, and a warrior raised a club to smash his brains. But before this could happen, Pocahontas supposedly rushed in and placed her head upon his, which stopped the execution. And the statement specifically is whether or not this happened has been debated for centuries. One theory assumes that if this took place, it was an elaborate adoption ceremony and believes that Smith's life was never in danger, though likely he would never have known that. And afterwards, Powhatan told Smith he was part of the tribe in return of 2 great guns and a grindstone. Powhatan would give Smith area on the York River and forever esteem him to his son N. Nantaqud. Smith was then allowed to leave the lead village where Chief Powhatan lived. And once Smith returned to Jamestown, Chief Powhatan sent gifts of food to the starving English. These envoys were usually accompanied by Pocahontas as she was a sign of peace to the English. On her visits to the fort, Pocahontas was seen cartwheeling with young English boys living up to her name of Playful One. Now, the English knew Pocahontas was the favorite daughter of the great chief, and consequently seen as a very important person. She was sent to negotiate the release of Powhatan prisoners. According to John Smith, it was for and to Pocahontas alone that he finally released them. And as time passed, however, relations between the natives and English began to deteriorate because weather. Specifically, when a severe drought had drastically reduced the tribe's harvest in the winter of 1608 and 1609. So the policy of the chiefdom was to cease trading with English because you got to support your people first. But the English settlers were demanding more and more food, and they were threatening the tribes and burning towns to get it. So Chief Powhatan sent a message to John Smith telling him if he brought the main village swords, guns, hittens, copper beads, and a grindstone, he would have Smith's ship loaded with corn. When Smith and his men visited to exchange, negotiations did not go well. Powhatan excused himself, and he and his family, including Pocahontas, departed into the woods. Unbeknownst to Smith and his men, according to Smith, though, that night Pocahontas returned to warn him that her father intended to kill him. And Smith had already suspected something was wrong, but was still grateful that Pocahontas was willing to risk her life to save his yet again. And as relations between the two peoples deteriorated, Chief Powhatan, worried of the constant English demand for food, and moved his capital from off the York River in 1609 to the Oropaks and I didn't even know how to say this river either. The Chickahominy?
Chickahominy. Chickahominy.
Cool. I can English a little bit.
Yep. You can Virginia English a little bit.
Yeah. So they moved farther inland, farther away from anyone who would land going up the river or anything else in the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, Chesapeake Bay.
I couldn't think of what that word of body of water was.
Yeah.
But so they left to get a little bit farther away, and so Pocahontas was not allowed to visit Jamestown anymore. And in the fall of 1609, Smith left Virginia because of a severe gunpowder wound. And Pocahontas and Powhatan were told that Smith died on his way back to England. So Pocahontas had stopped visiting the English, but that was not the end of her involvement with them. John Smith recorded that she saved the life of Henry Spelman, one of the several English boys who had been sent to live with the Powhatan Indians to learn their language and life ways. By 1610, Spelman did not feel as welcome among the Powhatan Indians and ran away with two other boys, Thomas Savage and Samuel, who was a Dutchman and his last name was unknown. Savage changed his mind and returned to Powhatan and told them about the runaways. According to Spelman, Powhatan was angry about losing his translators and sent men to retrieve the boys. Samuel was killed during the pursuit, but Spelman escaped to live among the Patawomic tribe, an outlying member of the Powhatan chiefdom. His account says he made his way back alone to Patawomic, but Smith, who spoke with Pocahontas years later, said she helped Spelman get to safety. Now, the years of 1609 to 1610 would be important ones for Pocahontas, as she was about 14 and had reached adulthood and marriageable age. She began to dress as a woman, wearing a deerskin apron and leather mantle in winter, since she was of high status. So, no longer dressing like a child, received into society as a woman. So she might also wear one-shouldered French deerskin dresses while encountering visitors. And she started decorating her skin with tattoos. When she traveled in the woods, she would have worn leggings and a breechcloth to protect against scratches. And so she would have also worn her hair loose, braided, in one plait with bangs, or once married, cut short the same length all around. And in 1610, Pocahontas married Cocoam, whom Englishman William Strachey described as a private captain. Cocoam was not a chief or a counselor, though mention of his being a private captain implies he had command over some men. The fact that he was not a chief and thus not high in status suggests that Pocahontas may have married for love. And he also might have been a member of her father, Powhatan's bodyguards, and so she remained close to her father and continued to be his favorite daughter after her marriage, as the English accounts imply. And so, despite being the favorite daughter, she still had freedom to choose who she wanted to marry. And for the next several years, Pocahontas was not mentioned in English accounts until 1613, when Captain Samuel Argall discovered she was living with the Patawomic. Argall knew relations between the English and the Powhatan Indians were still poor, and capturing Pocahontas would give him the leverage he needed to change that. So, Argall met with the chief of the town of Passapatanzi and brother to the Patawomic tribe's chief to help kidnap Pocahontas. And at first, the chief declined, knowing Powhatan would punish the Patawomic people. Ultimately, the Patawomic decided to cooperate with Argall. They could tell Powhatan they acted under coercion. Thus, the trap was set. And this trap was set up with Pocahontas accompanying the chief of Passapatanzi and his wife to see Captain Argall's English ship. So the wife then pretended to want to go on board and request her husband, and would grant only if Pocahontas would accompany her. So Pocahontas went, no thanks, because she didn't feel right about it, but as the wife kept insisting and crying, so she went aboard the ship, ate some food, and was taken to the gunner's room to spend the night. In the morning, when 3 visitors were ready to disembark, Argall refused to allow Pocahontas to leave the ship, and the chief and his wife seemed surprised. Argall declared Pocahontas was being held at ransom for the return of stolen weapons and English prisoners held by her father. So the chief and his wife left with a small copper kettle and some other trinkets as a reward for their part in making Pocahontas an English prisoner. And at her capture, Pocahontas was brought to Jamestown and eventually taken to Henrico, a small English settlement near present-day Richmond. Powhatan informed of his daughter's capture and ransom cost. He immediately agreed to the English demands, but in the meantime, Pocahontas was put in charge of Reverend Alex Whittaker. In Henrico, she learned English, religion, and customs, um, which apparently was not all strange to Pocahontas, although vastly different than the Powhatan world. And during her religious instruction, Pocahontas met widower John Rolfe, who became who would become famous for introducing the cash crop tobacco to the settlers in Virginia. And by all English accounts, the two fell in love and wanted to marry. So perhaps it's noted that once Pocahontas was kidnapped, Kocoum, her first husband, realized divorce was inevitable, as there was a form of divorce in the Powhatan society. And once Powhatan was sent word that Pocahontas and Ralph wanted to marry, his people would have considered Pocahontas and Kocoum divorced. And Powhatan consented to the proposed marriage and sent an uncle of Pocahontas to represent him and her people at the wedding. In 1614, Pocahontas converted to Christianity and was baptized as Rebecca. In April 1614, she and John Ralph married. The marriage led to the Peace of Pocahontas, a lull of the inevitable conflicts between the English and Powhatan Indians. They soon had a son named Thomas, and shortly after that, the Virginia Company of London, who had funded the settling of Jamestown, decided to make use of the favorite daughter of the great Powhatan to their advantage. The thought of a Christian convert married to an Englishman would encourage interest in Virginia and the company. So they traveled to England in 1616 as everything was paid for by the Virginia Company of London, and Pocahontas was known as Lady Rebecca Rolfe. And she was accompanied by a dozen Powhatan men and women. Once in England, the party toured the country, and Pocahontas attended a masque where she sat near King James I and Queen Anne. Eventually, the family moved to Brentford, where Pocahontas would again encounter John Smith. There is a bit to be said here, but it's not all as much matter, in my opinion. But mostly, Pocahontas was mad at John Smith. March 1617, the Rolfe family was ready to return to Virginia. After traveling down the Thames River, Pocahontas, seriously ill, had to be taken ashore. In the town of Gravesend, Pocahontas died of unspecified illness. Many historians believe she suffered from an upper respiratory ailment such as pneumonia. Pocahontas was 21, give or take, and was buried at St. George's Church on March 21st, 1617. John Rolfe returned to Virginia, but left the young ailing Thomas with relatives in England. And within a year, Powhatan died. The peace of Pocahontas began to slowly unravel, and life for her people would never be the same. So there's a little bit of history that's true in this story, and that is the written, whitewashed history. Now we're going to oral history that has the trigger warning as mentioned before, so I hit my mic. If you are uncomfortable with the mention of rape, this is your last chance to skip over, because you can look this up yourself with a little bit more detail and as to what happened with Pocahontas and have more things filtered out for yourself. So, as I mentioned before, Dr. Linwood Littlebear Costello and Angela L. Daniel Silverstar recently published The True Story of Pocahontas, The Other Side of History. And so this is more sourced from them of her actual history and the story of her. So, as we know, she was the child of the chief Powhatan, and his last child with his first wife, Pocahontas, his wife of choice and of love. Pocahontas' mother died during childbirth. Their daughter was given the name Matoka, which meant flower between two streams. The name probably came from the fact that the Mattapony village was located between the Mattapony and Pamunkey rivers, and that her mother was Mattapony and her father Pamunkey. Again, bear with me with pronunciation. I'm trying my best. And so I'm not going to say her father's name, but He was devastated by the loss of his wife, but found joy in his daughter, and often called her Pocahontas, which meant laughing and joyous one, since she reminded him of his beloved wife. There was no question that she was his favorite and that the two had a special bond. Even so, her father thought it was best to send her to be raised in the Mattapony village rather than at the capital of the Padawan chiefdom. I'm not trying the name again as I butchered it before. She was raised by her aunts and cousins who took care of her as if she were their own. And once she was weaned, she returned to live with her father. Her dad had other children with Pocahontas' mother as well as with his alliance wives, but Pocahontas held a special place in her father's heart. And she held a special love and respect for her father as well. Um, their love and bond never wavered, and most of her older siblings were grown by the time Pocahontas was born. Many of her brothers and sisters held prominent positions within Powhatan society. Her family was very protective of her and saw it too that she was well looked after. And as a child, her life was very different than as an adult. The distinction between childhood and adulthood was visible through physical appearance as well as through behavior, as Pocahontas would not have cut her hair or worn clothing until she came of age. In winter, she would have worn a covering to protect against the cold. There were also certain ceremonies she was not allowed to participate in or even witness. Even as a child, the cultural standards of the society applied to her. In fact, as the daughter of the chief, it was more serious in the fact that she must follow the guidelines and be disciplined properly. So she received more supervision and training, and because she was her father's favorite, she likely received more security. So when the English arrived, the people welcomed them and desired to be friends and trade with settlers. But as Pocahontas was a child, she would have not partaken in this, and the most famous event of her life, her so-called rescue of Captain John Smith, did not happen the way he wrote it. As Smith was exploring when he encountered a Powhatan hunting party, a fight ensued and Smith was captured by the chief's brother, and that brother took Smith from village to village to demonstrate to the Powhatan people that Smith, in particular, and English in general, were as human as they were. The rescue was a ceremony initiating Smith as another chief. It was a way to welcome Smith, and by extension, all the English into the Powhatan nation. It was an important ceremony, so something that Pocahontas would not have been part of.
Seems logical.
And the chief of Powhatan truly liked Smith. He even offered a healthier location for the English, a place east of their site here, the capital of the chiefdom. And Smith's life was never in danger. So afterwards, Pocahontas would have considered Smith the leader and defender of the Powhatan people as an allied chief of the English tribe. She would have expected Smith to be loyal to her people since he had pledged friendship to her father. In Powhatan societies, one's word was one's bond, and that bond was sacred. And as the English were welcomed by the Powhatan people, this cemented this new alliance. Food was sent to Jamestown during the winter of 1607 and 1608. Doing so was a way of good faith from the whole tribe. And during these visits to the fort with food, that Pocahontas became known to the English as a symbol of peace. But again, since she was a child, she would have not traveled with these escorts of food because she was too young. Because she was not been likely to travel or without adequate protection and permission from her father. So if she had gone, it'd be extremely likely to have noticed her. But as we mentioned in the initial tale, the relationship between the Powhatans and English began to deteriorate, and settlers were aggressively demanding food. Caused a lot of problems. Another distinct point of how Pocahontas would have not really known John Smith, as the tale suggests, she would not have been able to run back to tell him that his life was in danger, to warn him, saying her father intended to kill him. She was very well protective and supervised. It's unlikely she would have been able to provide such a warning, and it would have gone against the Powhatan culture standards for children. And if they truly intended to kill Smith, Pocahontas could not have gotten past Smith's guards, let alone prevent his death. So there's another big just this didn't happen. We know as the relations continued, Pocahontas was still very much on the mind of English because she had a very prominent story told by John Smith. And she eventually had her coming of age ceremony, which symbolized that she was eligible for courtship and marriage. The ceremony took place annually, and boys and girls aged 12 to 14 took part. Pocahontas' coming of age ceremony took place when she began to show signs of womanhood. And since her mother was dead, her elder sister Matachana oversaw the ceremony, during which um, she officially changed her name to Pocahontas. The ceremony itself was performed discreetly and more secretly than usual because the priestess had heard rumors of the English plan to kidnap Pocahontas. After the ceremony, a powwow was held in celebration and thanksgiving. During the powwow, a courtship dance allowed single male warriors to search for a partner. It was likely during this dance that Pocahontas met Kocoum. And after the courtship period, the two married, and Pocahontas' father was happy with her choice, as Kocoum was not only the brother of a close friend of his, Chief Chapuzal, who was mentioned earlier, but his name was not, he has another nickname because he's the chief of Petawomic. And he had Kocoum as one of his finest warriors and knew Pocahontas would be well protected. As the English still wanted to try kidnap Pocahontas, her and Kocoum moved to his home village, where there Pocahontas gave birth to a son. And then in 1613, the long suspected English plan to kidnap Pocahontas was carried out. But unlike, as the whitewash story says, Chief Chapuzal and his wife were pressured against their will, as this was the lesser of two evils, and agreed to Argyll's plan for the good of the tribe. So Argyll promises protection and assured the chiefs that no harm would come to Pocahontas. And before agreeing, he made a further bargain with Argyll that the captain was to release Pocahontas soon after she was brought aboard the ship. Argyll agreed, but that didn't go to plan. He broke his word and would not release her. Argyll handed a copper kettle to Chapuzal and his wife for their so-called help, as a way to implicate them in the betrayal. But before Captain Argyll could sail off with his captain, he had her husband Kocoum killed. But luckily Pocahontas' son was with another woman, so he was able to live. And it goes on in the same tale of how Pocahontas' father immediately gave to ransom for Pocahontas' release. And she was about 15 or 16 years old this time.
And she's got a kid.
She has a kid about 15, 16 years old this time. So some other specific details was that she got really depressed. She kept being insisted by her captors that her father did not love her. Her sister would come to her, and she had confided to her sister that she had been raped and that thought she was pregnant. She was hiding her pregnancy, which was the main reason Pocahontas was moved to Henrico after only about 3 months at Jamestown. She eventually gave birth to a son named Thomas. His birth date is not recorded, but oral history states that she gave birth before she married John Rolfe. So, if you put two and two together, she was forced to marry her abuser, which has unfortunately in history happened many a times. And so, in spring 1614, English continued to prove to Pocahontas that her father did not love her. They staged an exchange of Pocahontas for a ransom payment, which was actually the second such payment. And during the exchange, the fight broke out and negotiations were terminated by both sides. Shortly after this ransom exchange, Pocahontas converted to Christianity and was renamed Rebecca. And in 1614, Pocahontas and John Rolfe was married in Jamestown. Whether she truly converted is open to question, but she had little choice. And so she was a captive who wanted to represent her people in the best light and protect them. She probably married John Rolfe willingly, since she already had a child with him. The only reason her father had consented to the marriage was because she was held captive, and he feared that what might happen if he said no. 1616, they went over to England with several Powhatan representatives, including Pocahontas' elder sister and elder sister's husband. And they were actually, I'm not using the word that they use, but the priests, the higher other people in the society in disguise. In 1617, they were ready to return to Virginia after a successful tour arranged to gain English interest in Jamestown. But on the ship, Pocahontas became very ill and began convulsing. Matachana ran to get Rolfe for help. When they returned, Pocahontas was dead. Young Thomas was left behind to be raised by relatives in England, while the rest of the party sailed back to Virginia. It is believed through her family that Pocahontas would have been murdered. Poison was suspected, as she had been in good health up until the dinner on the ship. Eventually, due to the loss of his beloved daughter, the chief of Powhatan died April 1618. And that is, with many rough pronunciations, the whitewashed and correct version of Pocahontas' story, not the rosy version that Disney sells, and ignoring the horribly dangerous time period for tribes around where Pocahontas grew up, including her own, for just indigenous women and girls as a whole. And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's a whole nother 10,000 stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Imperialism. Yay.
Woo! Screw the English.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It,
We have lost many of cultures and many of people due to colonialism and mostly the English. They're not the only ones. There's been many other Spanish and French and Danish and this and that colonies, but English are
well,
the was the most celebrated holiday is Independence Day from England.
yeah, well, I mean, I just read a story where there's not a Sumerian culture anymore. That was taken over. Like,
Yeah.
it's greed and power, and it destroys people. Well, that's our history. That is how we get to where we're at. And sometimes that makes us want to go back in time and change things.
And that's why we have to learn it
Yeah.
so it doesn't happen again.
Learn the right history and the correct history. And that's why, like, I was doing all kinds of research for like female rulers. I have a whole list of like ancient this part of the world, ancient this part of the world, which of course, depending on what part of the world, depends on how far you go back as far as the, uh, history you can even obtain. Because
Mm-hmm.
if there is no information, there's no data. But the world needs to know what's happened. And because it's a part of us, if nothing else, it's a part of the earth,
Yeah.
which that's okay. That's why we have take time to celebrate and tell stories. And it's not always a celebration. Sometimes it's just a story so that people get the information because people deserve their stories to be out there.
They deserve the proper story, not the whitewashed versions in Pocahontas' case.
Yes. There usually aren't singing. There's no singing.
No singing animals.
No, that's what I was saying. I'm like, I don't think the angle, I mean, her best friend was like a raccoon, but he
I
didn't
think
talk.
her grandmother in the tree was the only one that sang.
Yeah. Because then I go to Mulan and I'm like, well, the dragon talked.
Yes.
So did the animals talk in Pocahontas? They're somewhere downstairs on VHS. Well, yeah, I know we don't come with very good energy when it's a work day.
No. I
No.
think it'll be better if we do another one in person, like we
Yeah.
did in Harvard. I just had
Yeah.
a lot more energy.
It's good to know that it's good to know the stories that are out there that aren't necessarily wholly true because that helps us. It's all data processing. It's collecting data and adjusting and researching it and understanding it and decomposing it. And from there, that's how we learn. So,
Yes, looking up from the right sources and going through their sources and other X, Y, and Z. It's not researching. If you're just Googling, that's just looking it up on the internet.
that's just taking the time to educate yourself. Just be careful because there's a lot of really weird things out there.
Yes. Find reliable sources.
Ask questions and go do something extraordinary.